exciting episode of Back for Our Future, the show that looks back to talk about our future and possibly yours. With me today, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend. I keep saying that one, but I'm going to come up with another one. I had some worked out at some point. I had a bunch of things teed up, but I left them. Anyway, with me, as always, is Tony Nick Najati, or as my phone says, Nike Jedi. Welcome back to the show there, buddy.
Oh, yeah, man. Glad to be here. As always. Always fun to be back.
It is, as we've said multiple times, we're always grateful for the feedback we get, which has been tremendously great. I have now been in certain social circumstances where some people knew I did the podcast, others didn't, but somebody else would bring up the podcast and they'd be talking about it and they'd start bringing up things that we referenced. And I found myself in a real pickle because I didn't have you to help remind me of what the hell we even said. So it's pretty interesting the impact the show is making. People are having a good time with it. And that's why we do this. It's a documentary in some ways. It's as we've said, we're looking back, kind of comparing it to where the world may be. And it's also just fun to not just reminisce, but to explore this time period of filmmaking and music, and certainly like of it's a coming of age story too, if we're being really honest about it. Speaking of that, this particular episode it's not going to have anything bad. This podcast will always be, for the most part, family friendly, but this one may contain a few references. We might tiptoe through the tulips of double entendres. We'll do our best not to say exactly what it is, but you have to remember that at this point in our lives, how old were you at this in 90, 92, 93?
How
old are you?
93, I'm 16. What are you, 14?
Yeah, I'm 14. Yeah, so
13, whatever.
It should dial in for you. I think I'm 14. It should dial in for all of you, the fact that you have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old who are best friends. Yeah. This should dial in for you guys. Like, if you weren't a boy and experienced that, let me just put it this way. I often saw movies based on the actress involved. And certainly if there was rumors of extra, if there was wardrobe changes without wardrobe, how about that for non-Tronda? We'll just leave it at that. So
you're having trouble saying it. You're having trouble saying it, just to beat around the bushes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it's because I know my mom listens and she's going to get on to me, and I'm just trying to say it in a way that, like, maybe I'll confuse her. That's my goal.
I think they know about us, dude.
Yeah, I think they do. I hope so. They raised us.
I mean, you are the guy who, in the first episode, throws a bunch of Nintendo maps that are not Nintendo maps out the door.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. 100% went down the route. So I'm going to take us into it. We're going to dive right in. It is April of 1993. Specifically, the date that we'll kick off with is April 23rd, and I'll let Tony tell this story. But I wanted to set up the understanding of, as we tell this show. Now, I know that I made a mistake last time. We had to move some episodes around, and we fixed that. But as we tell this, we do follow a little bit of chronological. I mean, this is very much the idea of like a documentary. We're And as I said earlier, we're kind of telling you the story as we go. So April 23rd, 1993, Tony goes to the Dollar Theater and things happen. You want to tee it up there, pal?
Oh, yeah. So crazy thing. So my dad worked at, when we lived in Mobile, my dad worked at a place called QMS, and it's kind of a big business in the city of Mobile. And we had moved from New Jersey so my dad could work at this company. And the thing is, I mean, he did very well there. The thing about it is he had to go out of town quite a bit when he was there. So he was out of town a lot, leaving my mom and myself and my little brother, who's almost 10 years younger than me, to be by ourselves, So, it was that kind of thing. So my mom always had to kind of find time that kind of matched my brother and myself. And, I got to do things for Tony sometimes and stuff for Jeff and, that kind of thing. And on a particular night in April of 1993, our worlds all collided together to do the exact same thing in a very bad way. Listen, my mom loves going to the movies as much as I do. I mean, we still do it to this day. We're there at least once a week, and I mean that's always been the case. And so she wanted to go to the movie just as much as I did. But I'm 16 years old. And I wanted to see this movie called The Dark Half, which is a George A. Romero directed. Who doesn't know him? He's Mr. Horror film, and
Right.
of course, it's based on a book by Stephen King, who of course is the horror writer, of course. And so that's an interesting combination in itself. And I had actually talked my mom into going to this movie, and it's rated R, very rated R. And I'm 16 years old, and the Dollar Theater was one of two theaters that really carded people for rated R movies. It was the one theater that was kind of you could maybe get in an R film, but a lot of times they did card at that theater, and the other one being Dolphin Street. Dolphin Street was really really good about carding as well, because of the they had a lot of tricky clientele over there at different times.
Right.
But so I got my mom to take me to this movie, The Dark Half. Well, in order for us to go, my brother had to go as well. He's
Mm-mm.
7 years old at this time, and so we decided to go to the exact time eludes me. I have a ticket stub somewhere, but it was probably around 9:30, somewhere in that range.
Oh boy.
And yeah, we're going to the later showing of The Dark Half. Now, this movie theater, the Dollar Theater back in the day, it wasn't stadium seating, and of course we don't have the seating that we have now with all the lounge chairs and all that fun stuff. We had true theater seating, which meant if you sat in the first like maybe 3 rows, you were literally looking up at the screen like this, and that was just the way it always was until they changed the seating around. So we get to the theater late, and we walk into the theater when it's dark, and the movie's about to start, and we find 3 seats on the left side of the second row,
Oh
and
my god.
and we have to climb over these other people to get there, and we're sitting basically on the left side of the theater, looking up at the screen. Me, my mother, and my 7-year-old brother, and The Dark Half is getting ready to go on the screen. So, for anybody who's seen this film, it's a horror movie straight up, but um, it's I wouldn't say it's overly gory by any stretch of the imagination. There's definitely some blood and stuff, but it's not horribly gory, and it's got a great cast: Timothy Hutton, Amy Madigan, Michael Rooker, a wonderful cast. But in the first of the movie, plays very innocuous. It's very benign in a lot of ways, except for like one little scene where you see them open up his skull, and there's a little bit of blood there, but that's about it. It's like an operating scene, and it's very quick, and that's like in the first 2 minutes. And then after that, it settles into trying to explain what's going on in this little town, and for the first half an hour, nothing bad happens on the screen whatsoever, and we're sitting there, and my brother's doing great at this time. Everything's going really well. And then all of a sudden, they introduce the George Stark character, who's doubly played by Timothy Hutton. He's playing both characters. And all of a sudden, he pulls this old man out of this truck. And once that happens, my brother lets out the I don't know how to describe it. It is the most shrieking, crying bellow you will ever hear in a movie theater. There's nothing else to compare it to. I've never heard it since. And he starts he starts saying to my mom, "Mama, Mama, I don't like this. Mama, Mama, I don't like this.
Oh my
Mama,
god.
I don't like this." And he's just not happy. So then, so then that comes in, and at this point, George Stark becomes like a raving maniac. He starts killing
Right.
people on the screen like every 3 or 4 minutes, and so he's freaking out. My brother is freaking out in the theater, going nuts. I mean, he's really, really, really. At this point, he's crying in the theater, and there's some random and this theater is packed. By the way, this is not a Tony mom story where we go into final analysis and the theater is empty. This theater is jammed. It is like a Saturday. I think it's a Friday or Saturday night. It's packed, and there's a guy behind us, maybe 3 or 4 rows behind us, that starts saying very much out loud, "Get that kid out of here. Get him
Oh
out of
my
here."
god. Oh my god.
We're those people at this point, right? We're the people that nobody wants to be. We're those guys, you know. So that's why I've always got a little bit of empathy for the kids in theaters now, because I lived it. I was those people, so I get it. And so my mom waits like maybe another 30 seconds. It's not getting any better on screen,
Right.
and looking straight up at it anyway. And she's like, "Okay, I got to get him out of here." So she gets him out of there. I stay for maybe another few minutes because she told me to stay. She's like, "You just stay and watch the movie." And I said, "Okay." And then I'm watching it. I'm like, "They're never coming back in this theater. There's no way." And they tried to get back in the theater. And then all of a sudden, he kills another person on screen. And just
Oh
freaked
no.
out. He's just going nuts. And so he walked back out, and I left with him at that point. Um, and we never finished watching that movie that night. Of course, I've seen it several times since, and I even watched it. I even did another watch before this show, just so I could know all the plot points and stuff again. But yeah, it was crazy. I've never experienced anything like it. Never.
Now,
Yeah,
now my question is: has Jeff actually ever watched the movie?
I don't think so, because he's not a horror guy.
I know.
He,
I wonder why.
and it's funny. And it's funny because so it's funny because he hates horror movies. Can't stand them. But I always have to tell him. I always have to ask him what he wants to see, because he doesn't quantify every horror movie as a horror movie. Sometimes he'll
Right.
be like, "Oh, that's a thriller," and I'll be like, "Nah, it's kind of horror," and he's like, "No, I think it's a thriller." I mean, because he is the guy who likes to watch The Walking Dead. He had no problems watching Negan, bash Glenn's skull into a bloody powder, but of course, a couple of throat gashes in the dark half sent him way over the edge back in 1993. But pretty funny story. I mean, I've never been the person who had to leave the theater early because of a behavioral thing, but I mean, we should never have had him in the theater to begin with. We're well aware of that now, of course. We were well aware of it then. We knew it was going to be kind of an issue, but we took our chances and it failed.
No, I get it. I mean, look, I haven't taken my kids to that, but I took my kids to go see. They reissued The Phantom Menace, and I took my kids to go see it. And there's nothing really scary in that movie whatsoever. I was more concerned with it's a long movie or whatever, and they did okay. But I remember taking Finley to see her very first movie, and we were very concerned. Like, okay, we're going to go see Minions. How's she going to hold up? She loves these movies. And she made it about 35, 40 minutes before she was like squirming about and she wanted out. And so I just walked her out for a little while, and then we came back and she sat back down. It's interesting because like the funny part is kids at that age don't know the difference between reality and fiction. So Pearl will still ask me from time to time, my youngest, she'll be like, she'll see something like Jaws. I was Jaws. It was exactly Jaws. She goes, "Daddy, that's a true story, right?" And I was like, No. No, Jaws is not real. Star Wars isn't real. None of those are real. But she doesn't know the difference yet. Like we take it for granted, but their brains literally can't process it. So Jeff was experiencing the dark half in real time, like
In real
literally
time.
experiencing. Yeah.
It was a funny situation, but I mean, at the time, and I actually just spoke about with my mom a couple weeks ago about that incident, and because I knew it was coming up on the show at some
Yeah.
point, and she's like, yeah, she's like, I just I was trying to balance doing something with you and doing something with him, and it didn't work out real well, and that's just the way it goes sometimes.
No, it's good. Funny enough, though, is maybe a movie, and I don't know because I don't remember this, but maybe a movie that would have been more appropriate was the next one on the list, which is Who's the Man, starring Ed Lover, Dr. Dre, and Dennis Leary. Like maybe that option would have gone better. Maybe less violence. I don't remember that movie, so you're gonna have to tee that up. I do remember Ed Lover and Dr. Dre being in a movie together. I forgot Dennis Leary is in it, but I don't even remember that film at all whatsoever.
Well, let's first tee it up by saying this is not the Dr. Dre that everyone actually knows, probably for the most
Right.
part. This is not NWA Dr. Dre. This is Yo MTV Raps Dr. Dre. So
Right.
it was MTV, kind of an MTV-ish type movie. It was really weird. It's a really weird film, and I saw this one at the Dollar Theater as well. Probably, I was only a couple days after the Dark Half incident, really, and so what happened here? This movie is, again, Ed Lover, Dr. Dre from Yo MTV Raps, Dennis Leary in one of his early roles as like the police lieutenant, and then it's directed by Ted Demme.
What?
It's directed by
This is wild.
It's directed by Ted Demme, who was really into kind of like rap culture and things like that. And it's got a really, really crazy, cast and a lot of like MTV personalities, and I think Kurt Loder's in it as well, and at different times, and yeah, it's got Ice-T, and it's got a lot of rappers, and it's got Bernie Mac and Colin Quinn and a bunch of people like that. So it's just like this Modge Podge of actors in this movie about Ed Lover and Dr. Dre becoming cops, and they talk about donuts a lot, and it's not the world's greatest movie. It's pretty funny though, actually. Their only movie, it's not like Ed Lover and Dr. Dre have a large catalog of films, but
yeah, it's not like they became The Rock and Kevin Hart, where they just crank out these great.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
So I was just going to ask: was this an MTV Films film? Do you know?
No, it wasn't MTV's film.
Okay,
it's an odd film.
it's just packaged that way. It's just fascinating to me because that's.
I mean,
it
was done by Columbia.
Crazy. I mean, what a interesting snapshot of culture at the time, right? Because I mean, if I'm not mistaken, even at that time, like a lot of hip hop. This is for a lot of us that are in their 40s. A lot of us will argue that this is the golden age of hip hop for a lot of us. I mean, this is when Dr. Dre and Ice-T, I think, A Good Day, whatever the song is, but I had another whatever the song is.
Well, I mean,
all those songs were popping right then.
Yeah. I mean, all that's gonna hit right around this. It actually hits before 1993,
right.
but
right.
But yeah, I mean, this is like they found a way to package this movie together and kind of I guess it didn't make a ton of money. It wasn't like a monster hit. It was like maybe about 10 million, somewhere in that range. But I mean, they found a way to try to package all these guys who are kind of big on MTV together, and like Bill Bellamy's in it, and and all the guys, like all the people that are part of the Yo MTV Raps show, and which I used to watch quite a bit, because I do like hip hop, and so Yo MTV Raps was a show that I liked amongst all the other ones that I used to watch on MTV that you and I talk about, the 120s and the Alternative Nations and the Headbanger Balls and everything else to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's listen, kids. That's back when MTV actually played music. I mean, they had shows to talk about music, and Yo MTV Raps is a great example of that. So it was 120 minutes being like flagship shows, and then they had offshoots of those flagships that created new products. Like Alternative Nation was an offshoot of 120. 120 was this great show that exposed all of us to new bands with interviews and all that. The hard part was we only got to really watch it during the summer, or at least I did, because it came on later at night. Yeah, and it was on Sunday nights, if I'm not mistaken. So like it was really limited. It was very college driven. It was very fascinating stuff. Whereas Yo MTV Raps would pop on, I think it was on like Wednesdays or Thursdays, but it had like a good time slot, or maybe Fridays, but it had a good time slot that was a little more on the front side. Headbangers Ball was on Saturday nights. So anyway, it's just an interesting timeline on that side of it. So I kind of think that movie is, I'm kind of interested in it now. I may go back and just see if I can find it for streaming and just rewatch it, just because it feels like it's the most 90s movie we could have ever put on this show. Like, it just feels so 90s.
If you're not going to check it out for anything else, check it out for Dennis Leary, because he's hilarious in this. I mean, he's doing his old Dennis Leary, stand-up shtick where he's just constantly ranting. And this is kind of what he does, but he's like, he's a police lieutenant, so he's really pretty funny, and he's kind of constantly going after Dre and Lover, throughout the movie. But their dynamic between those three guys is kind of worth watching in itself, because they're pretty funny together.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'm going to actually segue into the next one with the hard cut, if you will. I'm going to segue into the next one because I want Tony to tell this story, because although I know my motivations in seeing this movie, you didn't see it before me, right? I saw this and came to you. Is this correct? Do you want to tell this story and tee it up? Because I think it is the epitome of a young man just really chasing what young men want to chase after at that time.
So it's this movie that comes out right around the same time. I think it comes out around April 23rd with the rest of these movies, pretty much, but we don't see them obviously in the same day. But it's a movie called Indian Summer, and it's got a wonderful cast. It's like Alan Arkin and Diane Lane and Bill Paxton and Kevin Pollak and, Sam Raimi, Elizabeth Perkins, Vincent Spano, Julie Warner, Kimberly Williams, like a huge cast, especially in that time frame. And it's a pretty fun movie. That's a comedy kind of coming of age with all these people kind of getting back together for the summer and that kind of stuff. And you saw this. This is one of those rare occasions where you actually saw a movie before me, especially in that time frame. And I vividly remember you coming up to me at my house and saying, "I just saw the movie Indian Summer," and I was like, "Really?" And you're like, "Yeah, I saw the movie Indian Summer." I go, "How was it?" He goes, "Well, man, Julie Warner takes off her top and shows her boobies in this movie." And I'm like, "All right, I'm sold. I'll be there." And
couple of things. You guys got to know, Indian Summer is by far that is not a Drew Hall movie. There's not at all. Like, if you're a few episodes into this podcast, you guys will hear me perk up 90% of the time when I'm talking about action movies or whatever, with the exception of Indian Summer. And it's because of the movie Doc Hollywood, right? She was in that first, correct?
Julie Warner's in Doc Hollywood, yeah. And Kimberly Williams is in Father of the Bride and all. I mean, all these people are kind of big around this time frame.
But see, I loved the movie Doc Hollywood, and I had the biggest crush on her. I just thought she was the most attractive woman I'd ever seen in my life. So when Schoolyard Rules go around that in Indian Summer, there's a chance to see a little extra, a little lanyap, if you will, if you're from the South, then I'm going to jump all over it. And I did. Ironically, though, my wife looks a little bit like her, especially from that. So, I mean, it was just setting me up for my taste later on in life. But yeah, it is interesting that I would come running to you to tell you I saw Indian Summer, a very adult, non-sexual adult, but an adult-based movie, young man seeing it literally for one shot. That's
I don't know who you saw it with or anything like that.
It was not my family. I saw that. I bet I saw that with, I don't know who. There's no way my parents went to go see. They wouldn't even care about that movie.
I don't know, man. I don't know exactly. Like I said, I don't know exactly the story as far as who you saw it with. We never got that far, but I do know you were quite impressed with what was going on the screen.
One shot. Luckily, movies back then were 4 1/4, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But my God, why I decided to see that one. I also like the girl, Kimberly, whatever her name is. I had a crush
Kimberly
on her
Williams,
from.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, because she was.
Yeah, for sure.
I loved her in Father of the Bride, which is kind of where she gets her first real big break, and then
Yep.
this movie was kind of trying to get all those people together um, into one film, which they did. It did okay, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we jump forward a little bit in time and we go to a movie. I will be honest with you. If you said this movie existed, I would have no idea, but luckily for you, you programmed these notes so dadgum well. I'm very proud of you because it keeps on theme. Apparently we're stepping into a 2-for-1 special with the movie 3 of Hearts. I didn't know anything about this until in all honesty, Tony teed this up and explained a little bit to me, but I'm going to let him carry it away because I've never seen it. I don't even know this movie.
All right, so Three of Hearts is a movie. So Three of Hearts is a movie again with a really great cast, and at the time, the Baldwin brothers are kind of like one of the it families in film. Like every one of them is in a movie all the time. I mean, it was a running joke, that you couldn't tell these guys apart because they were always in films, and that they were in every movie. At least one of them was. And
Right.
so at this time, one of the hot names in and we're going to actually get to another one of his movies later. Is William Baldwin. William Baldwin is kind of a big name. He's had Flatliners and Backdraft by this point, and he's got this movie called Three of Hearts, which I see every movie, as everybody who listens already knows. But this movie happened to have the very beautiful Sherilyn Fenn, who I had a monster crush on at the time, and Kelly Lynch, who obviously is in Roadhouse by this point, which obviously is a movie everybody loves. And so I really wanted to see this movie because I knew what it was about, which was two
A two for
women,
one special. Yeah. Two
two
for one
women
deal.
and a guy in kind of a little cluster of love, so to speak.
Well done. Well done.
And it's got a great cast. Joe Pantoliano's in it, and it's a funny movie. It's a comedy, and it's not everything I thought it was going to be like. Obviously, or was let me rephrase. It was not everything I was hoping it was going to be,
There you go.
but it was good. It's a good it's a good romantic comedy. And
Right.
it, and
Right.
like I said, not everything I was hoping it was going to be, but the ladies look quite great, and yeah, I mean Sherilyn Fenn, wonderful actress. Kelly Lynch, wonderful actress. I would work with Kelly Lynch much later, probably about 11 years down the road, but yeah, I mean it's a pretty good movie that you've never seen before, and a lot of people
Yeah.
probably.
I doubt it. I doubt it. Now, um, I find it fascinating because this next sequence sets up something that and maybe we talked about. I don't remember us talking about this a lot, and I don't know if I was involved in this one, but there got to be a point, maybe it's a little bit later on, where we started making double features. And what I mean by this is we just made up our own double features. It became a thing. You started it for sure. But I just remember the double feature scenario becoming a very big part of our because there was at this time, like when movies came out, they would drop so many in many cases that we would have to try and see them. We would want to see them all because it was just the hype of it. And so we go into, you teed it up here. It's May 7th. It's a double feature, huge movie, which is dragging the Bruce Lee story combined with a smaller movie called Splitting Heirs. What do you remember about that? What do you remember about both of those? Because the Dragon story was, dude, I was super wanting. I remember being excited about it, but it also knew it wasn't an action movie. It was more, and has action, but it was more of a true tale. So I wasn't super diving in. What do you remember about all that?
So Jason Scott Lee, of course, is
Yep.
playing Lee, and it's the Bruce Lee story on. So it's the first. It's a biopic of Bruce Lee. So it's I mean it was a great movie. So this is a double feature that I didn't actually craft myself. This
Oh,
one, Carmike actually presented to us. So you got to go see Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, as a preview, and then you got to stay to watch Splitting Heirs, which was a comedy, kind of a screwball comedy with Eric Idle and Rick Moranis, and kind of an English comedy about um, uh, two half brothers. Once,
Right. I remember
once
this.
once the Duke dies, and then they got to
Yeah.
figure out who the real brother is and everything else. And it's a funny movie. Not exactly what I would pair with Dragon police story, I guess, but you got kind of two different types of films. Dragon's a wonderful movie. I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I mean, Jason Scott Lee, Lauren Holly, anyone who knows Bruce Lee, the history of Bruce Lee, knows he lived a very fascinating life. How he got to this country, and as far as you know, his story about martial arts and who he was allowed to teach it to, and I mean, it's all in this movie, and I'd highly recommend it for anyone who hasn't seen it. I know you've seen it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, I listen. Don't mistake it. Like I saw it later, more so as an adult, where I could appreciate it. But as a young guy, I just wanted a Bruce Lee action movie, which wasn't going to happen because he had passed away, obviously. But knowing that it existed, and as an adult watching it, my God, what a! I mean, I'm a little surprised that that movie didn't receive more critical fanfare because there's a nowadays I think it would have, because it's one of those things where like it pointed out a pretty big inconsistency, a big problem within not just the filmmaking world, but in society in general. Nowadays, it would be received as a whole different thing, and some stupid idiots might call it woke, but it's not. It was a true story based on reality. Interesting movie that I think that should be back on the list of rewatches, because it's one of those things that's probably forgotten about, and it's worth going back and rewatching for sure.
I mean, Bruce Lee went through a lot as far as in his life,
Yeah.
with just prejudice and all that, and prejudice and racism. To be real honest,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a guy who was well, and not just by people here in this country, but people in his old country who would tell him that, hey, you can't teach martial arts to Americans. He wanted to teach it to everybody,
Right.
and people wanted to tell him who he could and could not teach it to. So it's actually not a white man bad type scenario. It's more of a his old country telling him, no, you cannot do this. No, you cannot teach it to
Right.
these white Americans. That kind of stuff. So it's kind of a reverse type scenario, a little bit, and it's definitely fascinating to watch the movie.
Yeah. It's again, I think it's an interesting, it's one of the things that when I saw it on the list of topics, it's one of the ones that I was like, I'm going to go back, because every time we have your picks, of course, but also throughout your picks, I also find little gems where I'm like, I need to go back and rewatch that, or it leads me down a path, and that's one of those that does that. I was going to move into talking about Dave, because Dave actually was a movie that I did not expect as a younger person to enjoy as much as I did. And then as an adult now, politically, what a fascinating film. What an absolutely fascinating movie. And you saw this at Carmike 10. Do you remember who you saw this with? Did you go by yourself, or was it with your mom, or who'd you see that with?
I saw this movie by myself.
Okay.
It was another one that got paired with another movie. I just didn't stay to watch the other film because I had already seen it. But it's an Ivan Reitman film, and obviously he's a classic comedic director, and he's got a wonderful cast here that's led by Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver, and obviously Ivan Reitman famously works with Sigourney Weaver in the iconic Ghostbusters films.
Right.
But yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful comedy, and a very fun movie, especially if you enjoy the political landscape. I, they never really said, but I kind of thought this movie was kind of put out there based off, kind of not, it's loosely based off, but I feel like they kind of took the quote unquote innocence of Bill Clinton at the time.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and kind of based it on that a little bit. I
Yep.
thought, or the perceived innocence of Bill Clinton being kind of
This
a
is,
Southern roots guy, you know.
but
But
it's pre Monica. This is
it's
all pre
pretty all of it,
Monica.
right? Exactly. That's why I said perceived innocence of
Yeah.
Bill Clinton. But yeah, it's great, and again, great cast. Franklin Angela, Kevin Dunn helped round out the cast, and you've got a wonderful director, you know, and Ivan Reitman, and yeah, I mean, I loved this film. I mean, I saw it, like I said, as a preview again, because at the time there were a lot of those types of things. Like Carmike would run a lot of preview screenings. So basically, what that is you got to go if the movie started on a April 23rd. A lot of times you get to go like April 16th to go watch the movie the week before, or maybe even 2 weeks before, and then a lot of times you get to stay and see another movie, and that's what these were like. Dragon was the same thing. Came out like a week before. You got to stay and watch Splitting Heirs, and this was the same type of thing. And I'd go to these all the time because it was a 2 for 1. You know, so
Hmm.
I would attend these all the time. I loved them. And yeah, Dave was another one. And this was a movie I recommended to a lot of people when I saw it because I Kevin Kline, first of all, is a St. Louis guy. Okay, let's get that straight.
Right.
And I love Kevin Kline anyway. I mean,
Yep.
he's had some wonderful films throughout his career, and this is no different.
Dave is seriously. Dave was the movie because Fish Called Wanda came out ahead of this, correct?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
which is a classic. But it was rated R, and I wasn't allowed to see that movie. So my first exposure to Kevin Kline was really that I remember. Or let me rephrase it. It may not have been the first, but this is where I remember him because of how good he is in this movie and how fun the concept of this movie is. And I think it's one of those where I just find it. I'm trying not to say anything political because it would be so easy to make a political joke right now. But it is definitely one of those where his performance really carries it. And then again, you have a great rounded out cast, but his performance in the movie super solid. I still remember. I can remember it. I remember the poster. If for whatever reason it's very vivid with me because it made an impact. It's worth watching for sure.
I want to
100% worth it.
something else about Kevin Kline because I'm going to give out an early pick because we don't get to this movie. It's already been released before '93, but Kevin Kline is absolutely wonderful in a movie called "I Love You to Death."
Oh, I
For
don't know that movie.
for anyone who hasn't seen that comedy with him and Tracy Ullman and Keanu Reeves, William Hurt, River Phoenix, absolutely
Mm,
film, hilarious movie, and Kevin Kline is quite good in that one as well.
that's a killer cast in that. Seems like you said it's called "I Love You to Death."
Yeah, I love you to death. It's
Oh,
about
sweet.
a man who's cheating on his wife, and Tracy Ullman decides, along with her mom and other people, that they're going to kill him.
Oh
And
God.
and so they poison him. They do all this stuff to him, and he's still alive. And so and it just goes. It's just quirky, man. But it's wonderful and hilarious, and you get all these great cast members in their prime, and even some are early. Like Keanu Reeves is kind of early in his career at this point, and yeah, it's really funny.
Oh, good. I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna put that one on my list of something to watch.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why. If you were to sit down with me and say, "Hey, Drew, name a movie you would have rented from Farmore," I I I would have said there was a movie called like I think it was a low budget movie called Executive Action or something, and it had like it had it was like a Canon Globus movie. I just remember it. It was something like that. It wasn't Executive Decision, but it was something like that. But the next movie I would have told you is a movie called Posse, and you put it on this list. Can you tell? I That movie is a completely interesting genre film that who would have known it would have ever worked, but it does. What do you got on Posse?
So the funny thing about this movie is it was one of the films that started the summer that year.
Right,
It was like it's an early May release, and of course May starts the summer in film.
right.
Uh, it's not really summer in May, obviously, but that's what starts the summer in film because At that point, some people are getting off school and such. And Posse is one of those movies that gets released early summer. Well, we're still in this weird little area in Mobile where the movies are kind of segregated, so to speak. I mean, we get all the movies at this point. We got West Mobile, but this movie was not playing in West Mobile. This movie was only playing exclusively at Dolphin Street,
Right.
and so at this point, I kind of don't need Dolphin Street's theater. I hate to say that. It's 1993. I've been to Dolphin Street a lot, and if I'm over hanging out with my friends, I might end up at Dolphin Street if I'm hanging out with some of my friends over in that area. But outside of that, I mean, I don't really need to go there. I think by this point there had even been a shooting at that theater
Yep.
that
Yeah.
I remember quite well, and so going over there was kind of like, you can go over there, but we'll see what happens, that kind of thing. So if I had the movies over at Carmike 10, I would just go there because it was a much safer area, or the Dollar Theater, or wait to see them at the Dollar Theater, or go to Springdale or any of the other theaters that we've talked about. This one just happened to be at Dolphin Street. I didn't go, so I waited for it to be a Farmore rental.
There
And
we
so I
go.
rented this movie along with, 5 other films for the weekend, like I always did. And I actually quite enjoyed it. It's Mario Van Peebles. He's always got a little political thing to say. Him and his dad, of course, was Melvin Van Peebles, who always had a political thing to say. But
Right.
he's got an interesting story here about black cowboys in the old west, and it also he he puts out he did the same thing everybody else does in the '90s, which is put a Baldwin in his film,
Yep.
because
Sure did.
Stephen Baldwin is in this movie,
That's right.
and one of the Baldwin brothers. But it's got a really good cast. I mean, Blair Underwood and Pam Grier and Richard Gant and Isaac Hayes. I mean, it's loaded, and yeah, I mean, it's got Cool Mo D in it, for goodness sakes, as well. It's got everybody, but yeah, I quite enjoyed it, actually. I had wanted to see it when it was in theaters and didn't get to, but they use a very um, '90s hip hop track for the soundtrack, but good movie, man.
Look, it.
I like Mario Van Peebles films.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, the thing about that movie that I remember of watching it again is that film has a style to it. It has it flows a certain way. It wasn't like it was a black exploitation per se, but it has like a very direct drive. Like it has a motivation. And it's interesting to me because it's a genre film that's a genre film, right? Because it's very much talking to a specific audience, both people who love westerns because that's one portion of it, and then people who possibly are into the urban demographic or enjoy that side of things back in the day, the '90s terms there. But like this whole idea of it, and the movie's fine, it's fun, it does what it needs to do. It's a cool western for what it is. It has its message in it, like Peebles does. I don't know, you didn't do as much. I later did a part of a movie with him. I was just a second unit DP. He filmed here in Mobile a film called USS Indianapolis. I believe
Oh
that's
yeah, right. Yep.
and he's a sweet guy. The thing that I loved about him the most is how friendly he was to lots of people came up wanting to talk to him because he allowed himself to be very exposed. So he didn't have like a lot of like producers shielding him or other, he just would be on the street. Like if they were filming and people would yell out to him, he would go talk to him. Very nice guy, gave me great direction, said, this is what I want. And I went and filmed it and it was easy peasy, but nice guy. And so that's earlier on in his career. I would also later see him in a movie, I think later in a movie called Solo, where he just
Yeah. Great.
crushes it.
He's
Yeah,
a
it's a
great
killer
actor.
movie.
I mean, he's in this as well,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
you got a lot of guys, especially a lot of hip hop guys that were big at the time, like Tone Loc and Big Daddy Kane, and I mean, and it also has Tiny Lister Jr.
Yeah. Right.
uh, who's awesome, man, and I actually worked with him much later in 2006, and he passed away in the last couple of years, but just a wonderfully nice man. I mean, couldn't be any different than all these characters he played. He always played these really mean guys like Zeus and No Holds Barred and Debo and Friday, and he
Yep.
was the absolute opposite of that guy. I mean, he was such a wonderful, nice Christian man, and just so much like a big teddy bear.
Right. Yeah, that's how it always goes, though, man. It's like the bigger they are, the sweeter they are.
Yeah.
And he definitely it's fun to hear that he was that way for sure. Well, this takes us into a movie that I watch more regularly than not, just because I still find it to be absolutely hilarious. I was recently watching this one with my daughter, who got obsessed with the little seat gags, you want to call them that, but there's a repetitive gag, and that has taken us into to Hot Shots Part 2.
Yeah. This is it, man. This is it right here. This is the first movie that you and I see together only by ourselves.
Right, right.
Nobody else is involved. Your dad's not with us. We got together and we said, you know what? Let's just make a day of it. Let's go see Hot Shots Part 2. Because that's what two teenage scumbags do. Go see Hot Shots Part 2 together. And it was absolutely brilliant.
Oh yeah, it's right in our wheelhouse. I mean, that's the whole thing about all of those movies, is that adolescent humor is just, and it still holds up for me. It's still funny to me. I mean, if you don't find farts funny, then you're probably not going to like the comedy in Hot Shots Part 2. Not that it's a lot of fart jokes, but it's laughing at really silly stuff and a lot of parody. And if you don't like satire and parody, it's definitely not. And that's what you get from it. But as two young guys going to see that movie, it is interesting because that was I guess for now that I'm a parent, it's a trust moment. So at that point, my parents were comfortable enough with you and trusted you enough to drive our happy asses to the movie theater to go see Hot Shots Part 2. You know, I'm 14, you're 16. We're going to see this movie. We're going to go hang out. And that really kind of starts, like, once we got permission to do that, it's a slippery slope of doom from this point forward. Because once we got permission, baby, that was it. It's almost like we just needed the blessing. And once we got the blessing, we just took it to the next level.
Yeah, we needed to be on our best behavior for that occasion for sure. So we got to do it again.
Yep.
I mean, which of these is your favorite? Because like Hot Shots Part 2 is definitely different than the original Hot Shots.
Yeah, so the Lloyd Bridges, any of the bits with Lloyd Bridges in Hot Shots 1 is some of the funniest things to me to this day, and I still say those lines. I still say it. I'll sit on something and be like, "Oh, that's a crab from Vietnam," or whatever. I'll just act like him in that movie. I think I would have to say that Hot Shots 1 is still my overall favorite for some of the jokes, but my God, the parody stuff in Part 2 is, I mean, you get Rambo out of the gate. I think it was Rambo 4. You get some really good, stupid moments in this movie that are just classic.
Well, that's the great thing because like that was the great thing about this series that's different than like maybe Naked Gun and other movies like that, because they lampoon Top Gun in the first movie, and in this one they were lampooning Rambo, and so in a lot of ways, you know, it's just and I just felt like this is vintage Charlie Sheen. Like this is where he should have been pretty much his whole career. In these types
for sure.
I mean, he's so funny in these, and I know he pops back up in scary movies. He does a lot of those. He'll do a lot of those later on too. So he kind of stuck in that wheelhouse a little bit here and there. But I always thought that he would try to become more of a serious actor at different times, do more action stuff, and he could do it. I mean, but I always, because he does it great in The Rookie.
The Rookie's fantastic.
It's a wonderful film, wonderful movie,
Yeah.
and so he does that, but I always felt that he was really good in these like sarcastic. I just felt like that was his wheelhouse, and he's wonderful in these Hot Shots movies. Just like I loved him in Men at Work with his brother Emilio,
Yep.
and great in the comedies. And I felt like that's where he should have always been. And in TV, that's where he makes his bread and butter on like 2.5 Men and stuff like that. But the Hot Shots movies were special, man. They were really important.
Topper Harley is one of the greatest characters to ever exist, and the stuff that he does, just the way he says lines with such conviction that are so stupid. If you've not watched Hot Shots or Hot Shots Part 2, I don't know which one to tell you to watch. You don't have to watch them in order. There is no real reason to watch them in order. Just if you want to watch if you want to see a Top Gun parody or you want to watch a Rambo parody, that's all you got to think about. Your choice. Part 1, as Tony said, that's your Top Gun. Part 2, you get Rambo.
We were really excited about seeing this because we were really big fans of the first movie.
I loved it, dude. I still do.
Yes, I mean, this wasn't just some movie where you go, let's just go see Hot Shots Part 2 because nothing else is out. No, we were very excited to see this movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you remember anything that happens after we leave that theater?
No, not necessarily. I see some notes, but I don't know what they mean. I don't know what they mean.
So we would leave the theater and we were like, oh, we're hungry, And what's going to end up becoming a tradition and a staple is us going to the Subway that's literally around the corner from our house.
Is it the one on Lloyd's Lane right there?
Yeah, it's that Subway next to the Taco Bell.
So that location. So we weren't already. So that location becomes important in, I guess, the next year or so, right?
Oh,
because
absolutely, it's huge.
Yeah. Yes. So I did not realize that Subway was that. This is. So did we introduce this location to the rest of our friend group as being like the spot where we hung out? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think it's partly that, and partly the fact that Jonathan gets a job there as well later on.
Bunch of losers.
later on, but I think that all helped. But we would go there that day. I mean, we were fans of Subway. Come on, man, we liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were fans. I mean, we wanted to go get some food, and Subway was the place. So we went in. We actually went into the Subway and ate there like two grown adults.
Yeah, so back then it was owned, if I'm not mistaken, by what's that?
His name was Mike, right?
Mike, and wasn't he married to someone who immigrated into this country?
Yes.
Yeah, and so she would bust our balls all the time after we started hanging out there. Yeah,
yeah, and not at this time because at this point we were just two scumbags going into a Subway for
right.
And this is where this is the day that because I'd been to Subway before, but not really very fluent on their menu at the time. Just been in there casually here and there. But this is where I get introduced by you to the Sub Club sandwich.
Oh, right. That's right.
And the Sub Club sandwich. And as we're standing in line, you're like, man, I never get it on white bread, man. Do you know what that stuff does to your colon?
Yes.
And you launched into this whole little spiel about white bread into your colon. And I know that's because of your mother.
Oh, 100%. Listen, my mom, before we moved into Charlotte Oaks, my mom, who's always been very health conscious, my mom had a mill and she would order wheat and she would mill her own wheat. Now, my mom's she's like a chef level chef, like, cook, but like she would mill her own wheat and then she would make this homemade, like whole wheat bread, and she would make homemade whole wheat cinnamon rolls, and I would try and sell them around the neighborhood, and people would buy them. The thing is all I wanted was white bread, but it was ingrained in me to eat whole wheat, so that's what I did. But I remember I would do anything right now to just have one of those cinnamon rolls and a piece of that bread, because she would bake this bread and it would come out of the oven, and here it was. She was trying to tell me, oh, the best thing you'll ever have is fresh homemade bread with some butter on it. I would do anything for some fresh home. So, Mom, if you're listening, make me one slice of bread, though. I don't need a whole effing loaf. I just want one slice of bread.
I mean, we would. That's why I was hoping to tee up, because she would pass the bread around to people in the neighborhood. We get it every once in a while. I mean, every once in a while there'd be fresh bread from your mom at the house. It would just magically appear right across the street. and
Yeah.
mom would be like, "Yeah, Mrs. Hall brought some bread over, and it was always very good." Uh, but
Listen, it's cringy. It's cringy now. It's this part's cringy, but I literally would love nothing more than if we had some of that bread. You know where I'm going with this. I think if we had some of that bread and you and I reenacted the scene from the Cosby Show where he builds the sandwich.
it was a great scene.
Oh my God, that's the number one reason. Like the fact that Bill Cosby's gone and that show is not like out there anymore sucks, because there are some sequences of food hilarity that will forever be me and Tony's jokes, and everybody can be a part of them. But that was one of them where he is just making the sandwich, and I would do anything with that bread if we could make that sandwich. It would be
No,
incredible.
that's why I never let one person's mistakes ruin an entire show or an entire project. Because I mean, the Cosby Show is brilliant, and it has such great cast in it. I mean, that show's
Oh,
all time greats. I mean that, and the cast is absolutely wonderful, and they didn't all make those mistakes. So I can never fault an entire show because one guy did some bad stuff. I mean, you got a
yep.
wonderful cast there of great people. I've worked with quite a few of them off that show, and on top of it, a wonderful crew that knew nothing about what was going on. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been asked, like, what is the most influential show? You know, that question. I threw one up on Facebook the other day. What's the most influential album you ever had? If someone were to ask me the most influential show on my life, period, I have to say it's The Cosby Show. I learned about life lessons from The Cosby Show. Unfortunately, I learned life lessons as an adult later on from The Cosby Show, but initially as a kid, I did. I related to it. I related to it so well. I did not have brothers and sisters. I was an only child, but I obviously related to Theo, the way that his dad talked to him. His dad was a doctor. My dad was a pediatrician. The same thing. I mean, it was down the line. And I didn't understand, this is not making statements or light of anything. It didn't matter to me that they were a black family. I didn't know. To me, it was just like this family I related to is such a human thing. And then you go back and look at it and you understand as an adult the implications, or not implications, but the beauty of what that show was also telling in societal terms. Great show. And so you're right. You can't hold him against it for that reasons. It was, that was a long tangent how we got off of Hot Shots to Bill Cosby. My God, I love this podcast. If you don't love this about that podcast, you just are listening to the wrong show. I'll be honest with you.
But Hot Shots in the subway is how it all begins for us.
That's true. It's very true. And that's,
and remember it, people, because that's what's going to start all the debauchery later on.
No, absolutely. And one other piece about this, because it happened later, and I don't know if we'll ever touch on it. That same subway becomes the location in which I shoot with Tony the very first short film, like a real short film. We shot like stupid stuff, but this was like a legitimate short film. That location, that subway, Tony being a character, helping produce the movie, that subway is that important in our lives. And it starts with this post Hot Shots meal. That's a pretty big deal.
No, so it was awesome, and it was a fun day, man. I still remember it, a lot of it to this day, and a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and it's going to set up a much larger day in the coming months, because that is the catalyst for something that's going to happen in late July,
Right.
and really change our lives.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. For sure. So your line of dialogue in the movie, Can't Wait 1 Minute More, is you complaining about a sliver of lettuce, which brings us to May 27th when you see Sliver, which has one of the most...
Wow.
Huh?
What a segue.
I thought it was pretty good.
What a segue. You're the master. The master of the segue.
I can't see your face right now because I have the show notes up, so I can't tell if you're being sincere or not.
It's pretty impressive.
But for real, but you go see Sliver. Now there's 2 movies called Sliver, by the way. There's one with Nathan Fillion, which is fantastic.
Yeah, this isn't that one. This isn't that one.
All right, so this is a Baldwin movie, is it not?
Yeah, this is another Baldwin film. Yes, it's Billy again. Billy Baldwin, Sharon Stone. This cast was amazing. I wanted to see it. I did not see this with my mom.
Oh, thank God. Oh boy.
But Tom Berenger in this movie as well, who obviously we've talked about him in Sniper, and Martin Landau and Colleen Camp. I worked with Colleen Camp. but just a wonderful, wonderful cast. And they had a great director, Philip Noyce, and he, would do Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games, and I mean all these great thrillers that he's done. And yeah, I mean, it's a can't miss movie, right? Oh,
Well, hold
well,
on though. In fairness, there's a young man scene in this movie. There's a there's a young man appreciation scene. I don't know how else to put this, but as a young man, there was some appreciation
so
because it's
it's
yeah,
it's also written by Joe Esterhaus, who's famous
right,
for Basic Instinct and
right.
Showgirls. So that's so what I'm thinking going into this movie anyway. You know where my 16-year-old brain is going into this movie. I mean, it's Sharon Stone at the time, and if anyone who's seen the Sliver poster, it's very erotic anyway. It's like Sharon Stone and Billy Baldwin's like breathing down her neck, and it's like it's got a very erotic quality to it when you first see the poster, which obviously was out way before the movie, and of course you see the trailer and you know what you're kind of getting. And I was very happy to go see it by myself, and I actually do enjoy the movie. It's not that bad. I mean, it's just the ending is kind of like very abrupt,
Yeah,
and
it's like tacked on. It feels
right.
like a tacked on ending for sure.
It feels like they shot it 4 or 5 times. Like they
Hmm.
shot 4 or 5 different versions of that ending and tested them all, because I've done it. I've seen it. I've seen this happen many times in my career, and so they shot 4 or 5 different endings and just tacked this one on. Like, that one tested just slightly better than all the other bad endings. I mean, it was really weird. I did not see this movie again. Another friend of mine saw this movie first. But that would be Richard, who saw this movie before I did. He told me not to see this film. He was very clear about it. He's like, "You will not like this," and I was like, "Well, I'll like it enough, and that's all I need." And yeah, it was fine. It's not as good as Basic Instinct, Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Which I think is very, for all the jokes that are told about that film, it's a very good movie. But it's got a lot of interesting psychological thriller aspects to it, and it's not a bad movie. I mean, William Baldwin's fine in it, but I think he gets a Raspberry Award for this one later on too. And Tom Berenger is very good in it though, and he's always great. And Sharon Stone, you know, does her Sharon Stone stuff, which is
Yeah, she does
quite
some stuff.
be quite sexy in the '90s,
Yeah.
which is what she needed to do.
I remember like that movie had like a lore amongst the teen males after a while because there's really like there's probably on the VHS tapes. I think we're into DVDs at this point. I'm not for sure, but I think no, we're VHS tapes. There's
Not work.
probably
Yes.
yeah, there's probably a spot on the VHS tape where it's thinner because it's been rewound and fast forwarded to so many times as people skip ahead because back in
Right.
the day. But like it's one of those ones where like I remember people talking about it, like schoolyard talk about it, but the
Yeah.
schoolyard talk was like just for this. There's a very erotic scene in it, and it was this dialogue about that sequence. It's the same way with Basic Instinct. If you take those scenes out, this movie doesn't really have a lot of value. It is what it is. But Basic Instinct, in fairness, is a pretty good thriller.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need the gratuitous sexual shots. You just need a little bit of that. But this one, it's kind of part of it, and it's about he's got cameras and stuff spying on everybody. So it's kind of this weird.
It's just like kind of a cringy, little.
Yeah,
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 to be honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In today's standards, yeah, it doesn't make the cut. It doesn't make the cut. So speaking of that, we've touched on a bunch of these. Do you have picks for this week? Do you have a movie that people or a couple movies? What are your Tony
Yeah,
picks here?
I definitely say you got to go back and watch Dragon, the Bruce Lee story,
Sweet,
which I think is
I
a
would
movie
agree.
that I feel like it's a movie that was decent sized and it did well, and I feel like people have seen it, but maybe not enough people have seen it. I don't hear as much conversation about it these days, And you don't have to like Bruce Willis. I mean, not Bruce Willis, but Bruce Lee to enjoy this movie. You can like Bruce Willis too, but
Yeah.
you don't have to like Bruce Lee to enjoy this movie. I mean, it's a very good movie about a man's life.
What's interesting to me is like if one of my favorite current more modern movies is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't know why. I'm not a big Tarantino fan, but I love that movie and there's a great Bruce Lee sequence. But it makes me think about that point of how he got to that point as well. Like it's just an so if you want to go see that, if you enjoyed Once Upon a Time and you saw that scene, because that scene was slightly controversial in terms of dialogue and other things, then you should watch the Dragon Story because it does put a new perspective on how Bruce Lee got to that point and some of the things he went through to get there. And it might make Once Upon a Time, if you're a fan, it might make it even more enriching for you as alternative history
Great
as
movie.
it is.
Watch them together. They're awesome.
There you go. There you
They're
go.
both-
Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. So listen, we obviously love the show. We love the fact that we've gotten feedback from you. If you have not subscribed already on our YouTube channel, that's one option. If you have not visited our Facebook page, I highly suggest you go over there. Tony's done a great job of curating content to go on that page. We've added little pieces, not just show notes, but added little things we've come across or just fun bits. You're welcome to add and be part of that conversation too. So if you're on Facebook, it's Back for Our Future podcast. Is that correct, Tony?
That's correct.
There you go. There is some interaction happening on Twitter, and you can follow us or X, whatever we call it, Twitter, I guess, and that's back the number 4 our future. So you got to put the number 4 in the play. And then also the other thing to think about is on the YouTube side, feel free. I mean, if you'd like to see us talking to you, we're here talking to you. We do record these with video. If not, you can also catch us on Spotify, wherever your podcasts are, however you're listening to this now or watching it. There's other options for you. Spotify does have video. Apple Podcasts, it's all over that place. But we'd also love some feedback. So feel free to either hit us up on our social channels, give us a review, tell us some other stuff. Tell us your stories. Did you have a Subway that you guys hung out at? Did you have a best friend movie that the movie you saw with your best friend? Do you remember those things? Feel free to reach out and share that stuff. We have lots and lots and lots of more going on. So stick with us for all of that. And again, we thank you for bearing with us and sitting through all these now. We're excited for what the future holds. Tony, I'm going to let you have the last word, so think carefully.
Wow, yeah. Just stick with us because we got some great stories coming up. I mean, we have some great episodes coming up. We're going to be in 1993 for a very long time. It's going to be a wonderful year. We're going to have a lot of fun. We have some huge tales that are going to involve all our favorite movies, but a lot of great moments in life. And I hope you stick around for it.
Perfect. Thank you guys and gals and folks for hanging out. We will see you on the next episode soon.